About 100 Canadian soldiers were deployed to Poland this week on a humanitarian mission to help support Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war. Another 50 soldiers or so are expected to join them as part of NATO's Operation Reassurance. Earlier, I spoke to the Minister of International Development, Harjit Sajjan, about this decision and what else Canada could do on the ground to help. Minister Sajjan, nice to see you.
Likewise.
I want to start, if I can, with the announcement by your colleague this week about sending up to 150 Canadian Armed Forces to Poland for a humanitarian mission. What can you tell us about what those Canadian Forces members will be asked to do?
Well, first of all, as you know, our government has been looking at every department within our government and how the support that we can provide. From the Prime Minister's visit to Poland, where I had the opportunity to be there with him, we saw the needs and within Poland, and so we were looking at the situation on the ground, the humanitarian support that were actually needed. A request came in, and Minister Anand looked at the request, and that's where we're providing the troops. The work that they will be doing, as Minister Anand had stated, from supporting refugees in terms of the processing. And also making sure that the appropriate resources are going to the various places along the border for the refugees.
Could there be other things that we could contribute in this kind of way? And by that I mean broader medical support, perhaps field hospitals. Has any of that been considered or requested?
In fact, actually, those are the things we were anticipating some time ago. So just to let you know, in terms of the wider support, we have close to over 350,000 items that we have sent ourselves into the region through the United Nations, to the International Red Cross, and many other NGOs, which includes over 1,000 tents, and not just for Poland, for Moldova, for Romania, and I think we're also looking at Slovakia as well. That includes medical tents. So we've been in discussions with the Red Cross on what was needed. So we have a really large medical hospital that we were ready to deploy. Turns out the full hospital is not needed, but portions will be. So that's being coordinated. As you know, it's not just having a field hospital with all the right equipment. You need to make sure the people are there. So the location is being selected for that. So the answer is yes, but we're also going even further, from hygiene kits, mattresses, other tents as well.
Will those Canadian Armed Forces be able to help with, and I realize all these portfolios are sort of coming together, so I'm sure you'll be able to answer it, but will they be able to help with refugee processing or Ukrainians who are looking to come to Canada? Is there any expectation that some of that will happen there, or no?
In fact, actually, I think this is one of the things that Minister Anand did focus on, is that they can help with the processing, and something that the Canadian Armed Forces has done in the past as well when it came to the Syrian refugees. Right. So we're trying to move as many resources as possible. As you know, the situation, I mean, we all know how dire it is and how vast it is. So we're looking at exactly wherever those gaps are, we're trying to fill them. From our department, we actually have a team on the ground in Poland and in this surrounding region to identify where those gaps are, to send it back to, not only back to our department, but then look at which department can actually fill the resources. So the work that's ongoing it's quite vast, but as you know, the needs are also quite vast given the atrocities that are being committed on the ground in Ukraine.
Well, let me talk about a little bit about how to do that work in the midst of all of this. There has been, as you know, ongoing concerns around humanitarian corridors, not just to get people out, and certainly that was the struggle for Mariupol, but how to get stuff in. You know, it's one thing to get it to Lviv or even to Kyiv, but to get it into the eastern parts of the country where there is heavy fighting. What are you being told about that, and how can you mitigate for some of those concerns?
So we've been coordinating with the United Nations on this, and we started our work very early on. So first of all, we actually started stockpiling through the UN 3 months worth of supplies. And even now, we're actually stockpiling in cities where there haven't had an occupation or them being surrounded, just in anticipation. And the humanitarian supplies, this is something that the United Nations has been working quite extensively on. trying to work with the through the Russian military leadership to allow for the humanitarian corridors to go through. Right. It was extremely difficult. It wasn't happening. And so, in fact, a number of weeks ago, the United Nations told them exactly when they were coming. They knew what the procedures were, and then they just went. That's how finally the supplies actually got through. International Red Cross has done the same thing. Let's put it this way: we're putting United Nations and other NGOs are putting their lives at risk to get the supplies through because the Russians haven't been fully cooperative in this side.
I spoke to the UNHCR's Filippo Grandi when he was here last week. I know you've met with him as well. One of the things that he expressed concern about is that as a couple of things. First of all, as the war becomes more protracted in Ukraine, it becomes harder, obviously, to help people and harder for people to focus on it. But that also because the world is focused so much on Ukraine, and perhaps rightly so, we are not as focused on Afghanistan as we should be, and trying to get refugees out of there or provide assistance for people that want to stay. How do you manage things when you're dealing with two and more really, but these two major humanitarian crises?
Frankly, we have to manage it. We can't just focus on one crisis and forget about the rest. Right. We have to do it all. So this is why the work that we've been coordinating with Ukraine, we've been focused on other crises as well. So for example, in Afghanistan, we're up to now 143 million, the most recent announcement that we made. Let's not forget Yemen, let's not forget in Tigray or in the Sahel and other places. Yeah. So we are focused on this, but we can't look at these crises and also in isolation as well. They're all linked. And especially with the Ukraine crisis, the food insecurity crisis that has now exacerbated significantly because of Russia's now war in Ukraine. That food security crisis is going to be significant. So now we're working, and I'll be actually in Washington next week with the Deputy Prime Minister, with the World Bank and the IMF, to discuss the next steps on what we can do. So we have to do it all, because what we don't want to hear is, as we deal with one crisis, another crisis gets worse, and all we're doing is jumping from a crisis to the next. So we need to think differently, and I think what we also have here as an opportunity is how we have come together in support of Ukraine, and very aggressively for very good reasons. How do we take these lessons and apply to other crises that we have to deal with around the world?
Okay, Minister, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.